Can you hear me or no?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I was a 15-minute, like, yeah, right.
You give a gorgeous 15-minute look.
We're live. We're live now. We just went live. Hi, I hope we're now live and I'm talking to real people out there and not just the beautiful people in this room. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Polyamory 101. Oh my goodness. I am excited and very nervous and had too much caffeine, so I'm a little shaky. So I wanted to do this panel. First of all, I'm Nicole Pacent. Hello, she, her. I wanted to do this panel because, well, I'm poly. Hi. And I get questions about it all the time. People are so curious. Polyamory is something that has been, I mean, on the rise, I guess. Its stock is rising. It's becoming more of a term and a lifestyle and identity that's out in the zeitgeist. And I just feel like we need a ton more representation, and there are a ton of questions about it. So I figured, why not have these beautiful people on who all have different experiences, past and present, with polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, to just clear up some stuff. And audience, y'all sent in amazing questions. So I'm going to say at the top, we're going to try to get through all the questions that were sent in. However, if we can't, we will be finding a time today to extend this conversation on Instagram Live. And those of us panelists who can join will continue answering questions there. So if we don't get to your question, fret not, we will get there. So first and foremost, before I introduce these lovely people here, I just wanted to say, if you have no idea what polyamory is, it's defined many different ways by many different people, but the general umbrella means many loves. So polyamory. Underneath that, anything goes depending on the person. And yes, and I was about to say, and Dalila, please introduce yourself. And Dalila has another term underneath that umbrella that she defines herself by. Please tell us that.
Hi, I'm Dalila Ali Rajah. My poly journey started a very long time ago when nobody else knew what it meant, which was so much fun at parties. But I eventually came up with a term for myself. Like, I also identify as bi, I'm she, her. I'm ambifidelitous, which for me is very simple, like bisexual, like we, love people of multiple genders. I can also totally do monogamy. I can totally do polyamory. I know people that are not like our absolute monogamous people, and I know people who are absolute polyamory people. I really fluctuate between the two. Like, I'm married now in a monogamous relationship. I was married before in a poly relationship, and it worked in both ways for me.
Yes, I'm so, thank you, Dalila, for A, explaining that, and B, being here, because I feel like so many people can relate to that and are interested in that and kind of are like, I could flow depending on who I'm with. In fact, Mandahla is one of those people.
Hi, my ambifidelitous sister.
So with that, if all of you could go around, I'll call on you to make it easy with the boxes. If everybody could go around, introduce themselves, their name, how they identify, that can be gender and or sexual orientation. And then this is the fun one for all us film and TV people. If your personal poly journey were being turned into a TV series, as a couple of us are, what would the log line be? And for those of you out there, first of all, this can be terrible. Like, please, the worse the log line is, the better. I just want to have fun with this. Like, for those of you out there who don't speak TV speak, log line is basically just like the 1 or 2 sentence thing that you pitch somebody that's like, here's the general story. Like, here's what happened, here's where we're at. So just to give like everybody a little background, and if you don't want to keep it in that context, it's okay. I'm just screwing with you all. So I can start. Nicole Pacent, she, her. I am bisexual. I also identify as poly, not just from a lifestyle standpoint, but as an actual identity. I feel that it is as much a part of who I am as my bisexuality, from like an ingrained standpoint. And my terrible off-the-cuff log line would be when a young bisexual woman has repeated difficulty with fidelity in monogamous relationships. She is fortunate enough to encounter a lovely soul at a theater company who introduces her to the idea of polyamory, and thus a whole new life is opened up. Fast forward several years, she has a husband and a girlfriend now. There we go. Okay. Whoever wants to jump in next.
I'm still thinking I'm terrible at this. Somebody else, please go. Dear God.
When Mandahla Rose was asked by her ex-girlfriend if she would be interested in polyamory, her response was, hell no. But then she met this beautiful soul and fell in love, and her heart was open to the poly life and the world.
OMG, I love that one. That's so sweet. Oh my God.
When a young woman who thought she was straight and engaged to a boy was introduced to a girl and fell in love, the whole world opened up and they went on an 8.5-year journey of cray-cray between Detroit, California, the strip clubs, and the girl bars.
I want to watch that show.
Yeah, I also want to see that. Yes, very on board with that. I'm gonna go. Lauren, they and she pronouns. And I get, mine would be when a bisexual woman, when a bisexual woman stopped eating sugar and started experimenting with psychedelics, she began to listen to her body in a new way and realized that her lifelong struggle with monogamy was actually an identity of polyamory. But that didn't mean the world was always ready for that revelation. So that is part of mine.
Be a fun movie that had some animation in it, and like,
yes, it definitely is an animated drama sequence.
Like some tripping, and like that would be a fun show.
Yeah, and some conflict. There's conflict too. I wanted to make space for the conflict.
Yeah, you did.
I did. There's conflict. Yeah.
Lisa. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry, guys. Yeah, Lisa, Angelica, she, her pronouns, pansexual. Yeah, when during the first rave wave, at a rave with a group of very hot lesbians, a girl's world was opened with a foursome that didn't end for 2 years.
Yes, bitch, you win.
So romantic.
You win.
So yeah,
I love that.
then it turned into a triad, like a polyfidelitous triad that lasted 2 years, and that was 14 years ago. But I've had a 10-year, including marriage, since that was also poly. So yeah.
Yes, I love it. I want to watch all these shows. This is great. So right out the gate, obviously there are a ton of myths and misunderstandings around poly, and a huge part of that is because it just has no representation. So, people think it's everything from like just permission to cheat to just free-flowing open relationships to polygamy, like the Mormons do. I get a lot of questions about that. So I want to start out and go around to each person and ask, in your opinion, and in your experience, I should say, give me just one thing that poly is for you, means for you, and one thing it is not, right? So one myth you'd like to bust right now, and one thing you'd like to clarify about what poly is.
Well, the myth I'd like to bust is like the thing around the idea of cheating, because the reality is what cheating actually is breaking agreements and boundaries. And that's whatever that looks like, in my opinion. So as long as you're working within your own agreements, to me, that's like a healthy adult relationship and interaction with people. And And so it's not cheating when you have a polyamorous relationship and you actually honor those boundaries. I would consider it though when I was in a poly relationship and those boundaries were broken, I would have considered cheating too, because it's a betrayal of an agreement that we made with each other. I think poly is an opportunity to have multiple invested perspectives from a very deep, loving place within a relationship. I found that for me, like if we got into an argument, we happened to be in like a triad where all three of us were together. But I think even if you weren't, probably this would happen if you guys were close enough. Like we get into an argument, like I'd get into an argument with one of the people, but then there's another person who's just as invested as the loving part of the relationship. So like if I was like and ranting, they'd be like, well, actually, that's not kind of how that went down. They didn't say that they meant that. Like that's what's pushing your triggers right now, but that's not what actually happened. And it gave me like someone who was just as invested that had a different perspective, which was often very helpful and allowed for a deeper place of loving, I think, for all of us.
Amen. I can totally relate to that. Anyone? Next person? Mandahla? I'm just gonna call on you.
I think polyamory is radical honesty, like being absolutely open and honest with not just the partner that you are like the partnership, because actually we're all in a relationship, but with the other metamor.
What is a metamor?
Isn't that the it's the partner of my lover, the partner of my partner, my partner's partner.
I just learned the term last year too, and I've been poly since the 90s. I just learned metamor like this year from Lise.
It's a great word. Love that word. Love that word.
So Goosey's my metamor.
Yes.
Yeah. And polyamory is not no jealousy.
Yeah.
Gonna talk about that a little bit? What does that mean to you?
Well, it means that, I mean, jealousy is a human part of our DNA, so it's going to happen no matter what. And I think it's being honest with that jealousy as well, and actually and being open about it, and also knowing that you can be in two places at once. I can be jealous, but I can also understand what I am in and know that that is a part of that, and learn to work through that myself.
Amen. Cool. Great.
Ashe.
No? Lauren, Lisa, you know?
I'll go with what I think it's not, which is a lack of commitment. Often I've heard people say to me, like, I couldn't do that. I want something more committed. And I'm like, oh no, like, we are definitely committed. And I think it's perceived that sexual fidelity means commitment, but I would argue that commitment is so much more complex than that, like showing up for people and being unconditionally loving and caring. And I mean, there's like a plethora of things, but I think it only takes being there for, or having someone be there for you going through a heartbreak from someone else to understand just how committed poly people can be. Yeah. And what it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Go. What it is, I don't want to say broad, but a component. To me, it opened the door to compersion. Have to talk about compersion, which some people say is like the other end of jealousy. It's feeling all the like yummy, delicious like feelings of love for your partner's joy around someone else, and that is something unique to poly that I love.
Yes. I agree. It's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. Like just taking joy in someone else's joy. And the idea of, I know it's like mind blowing for most people to be like, how could I possibly feel happy about my partner being with somebody else? But again, I think like with a lot of groundwork and communication and honesty, it is so possible. I think all of us here have experienced some level of it. And it's
And
awesome.
on the other side of it too, the feeling of freedom and safety when someone feels that for you, like it opens up, for me anyway, it opened up such a deep well of love for the person that I was with who felt it, because it's like it helped me to feel like very, very, very deeply accepted, which I think is what we're all looking for in almost every relationship. And it was like a whole level of that I had never knew could exist.
Yes.
Backing on that, it heals shame, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that a lot, like many people, I feel like I grew up feeling like my impulse to have sexual and romantic relationships in addition to my main partnership, my whole life, I thought that was a moral failing, because the sort of like the whole like heterosexist, monogacentric, like all these things, right? It's like all part of the whole set of lies that you get kind of socialized into. Like, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. And I think I thought for a long time I was failing when I couldn't do the right thing. And then having somebody not only say the things you're feeling are not wrong, but actually I'm celebrating them and I'm supporting them, and I'm actually feeling, like you said, joy and love for you as you explore them, is like totally mind-blowing. It's like it's very, very healing. It's wonderful. Which I guess I've now started to give my answer to this question. Okay, my answer to the question, I love all that. For me, polyamory is about, the thing it is I have a husband and a girlfriend, and everybody has the freedom to explore additional sexual romantic relationships as long as we're in conversation with the people, with our partners. Obviously that's different in the lockdown space, sort of additional layers. But that's the general idea. So what I love about it is it's the freedom to define what relationships are on your own terms outside of systems and structures that have socialized you to make them certain things. So to me, it's actually part of a larger sort of like radical agenda, and part of like my life of just seeing the truth of things as opposed to having passively accepted certain teachings. So that feels very exciting to me about it. The thing it is not, and this is like part of my struggle with it right now, it seems like in this group of people, I'm on the newer end of poly, which is really actually lovely, because I feel like I'm often like a representative of it, even though I've done it for like just like a year and a half, though it's sort of been a lifelong journey to that. So I'm finding, as I'm in this sort of second coming out around it, like something it's not, but what people think it is like a graphic thing to share about myself. People act like I'm telling them something sexually explicit when I share that I am poly. It's crazy, because I can see them immediately picturing my sex life when I tell them. I'm like, that's on you. That's not what I said. And it does have sex, and sex should be normalized, but it's a huge, wonderful collage of things. And so it's, as an identity, I want to sort of uncouple it from somehow being inappropriate to share at all, which I've had in certain spaces.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. That also very much feels like bisexuality, you know, the way that when you say I'm bi, you're just immediately sexualized. And you're like, I mean, I know plenty of bi people who are not particularly sexual people, you know, but just have the capacity to be attracted to different genders, you know. And I think I would say that poly is expressed very differently and felt very differently by different people. But one thing it is not is just, you know, is like sex addiction. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't sex addicted people who are poly, sure. Like I don't want to discount them, but that's not
monogamous.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness gracious, probably more. But it is not, that is not what it is about. Again, it is not an excuse to just go wild. You know, I am, the last thing I'm ever going to do is slut shame. So you do whatever you want to do, but I would posit that unless you are being 100% transparent and living within agreements with all the people that you are with, you are not practicing polyamory, you are practicing something else. So I would say that. And one of the things that was brought up, the guilt and shame thing that you brought up, Lauren, that actually came up in audience questions. And I think we're probably going to dive straight into some of them because there were just so many wonderful ones. And this was one that came up. The question itself was, has anyone experienced internalized shame or guilt, and how do they manage to deal with it? I'd like to kick this off just by saying, like, that's so normal. I think for most people out there, whether you're poly or not, you probably, if you're watching this, fall somewhere under the queer umbrella. And all of us have experienced some level of internalized something while dealing with all of that, because we grew up, most of us, without seeing ourselves in society, on, you know, in media or anything. And there is a lot of shame that then comes along with going, well, I'm different and I must be wrong. And I can say for poly, that has certainly been the case for me. It's a huge part of why I'm doing this panel, because my own shame and guilt, and like you said, Lauren, this feeling of failing at monogamy really screwed me up for a long time, and also caused me to hurt myself and other people. And I would love to avoid that, to help others avoid that in their own lives going forward. So if anybody would like to speak to internalized guilt, shame, their journey with that.
It's interesting because for me, the beginning of my poly journey actually partially started, I think, because the woman who I fell in love with actually relieved some of my shame and guilt around queerness that I didn't even like. I hadn't realized I was queer, and I was a very late coming to awareness of being attracted to women at all. And I didn't actually fully realize it until actually I met her. But what was interesting is, like, before that, my ex-husband was like, I think that you're maybe attracted to women and you're not acknowledging it to yourself. But there was so much built up shame and ideas around it that I had completely blocked out experiences and things that I didn't realize I was blocking out. Mm-hmm. And then I asked her, when was the first time you've ever been with a woman? She's like, as an adult? Oh, da 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 da. And like, it was just like really like offhand. And I'd had experiences as a young girl with other, like the playing doctor, whatever, petting, that sort of thing. But I had such extreme shame about it that I never talked to anybody about it. Like none of my lovers, none of my friends. I'd literally never been able to speak about it. And her saying it that way with such nonchalance showed me that there was another way to be about it. And it made me want to tell her. And I think that that was what opened up my realization that I was attracted. It was an emotional thing. It wasn't a sexual thing for me initially with women. Like I didn't have like, ooh, I'm watching somebody hot walk down the street. It was that emotional capacity to give me relief from my shame and my guilt that opened up my heart to being able to talk to somebody and let me feel safer being myself, that developed and blossomed into the falling in love and the sexual things and all of those things. And we decided pretty early on. I mean, people shaded me, but I'm one of those people that's like kind of like a dive into love person. Like once I realize I'm in love, once I just like, you know, kind of fuck what you said, fuck what you think kind of person. By the time I'm there, like once I'm in love, it's like, you just got to deal, you know? So like we decided we weren't going to be in the closet about being poly. Our ex-girlfriend was in our wedding, like all of it. So
cool. So cool. Anyone else? Shame, guilt, things?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it. I think I've had like two versions of it. One was like personal shame that like I think we've been all talking to, where you think for a long time, like, don't think about that thing I want. You know, like a really crazy thing is that like for most of my life, until I came out as poly 2 years ago now, for my whole life, about half of my dreams were sex dreams. Like just a huge percentage of my dreams were sex dreams. And I'm like, I went to therapy for a long time with a Jungian therapist, where it's like literally all about your dreams being important. And I was like, that's normal. That's the normal amount. Everybody's having that many. It's not a thing. And then eventually I was like, this is definitely a thing. And that's actually completely changed. Also occasionally, but like it's a totally different percentage of the dreams now. So I think like a lot of those things is just like, it's so interesting. I always say like coming out as bi when I was in my early 20s was so much easier in my family and in my social circles and in the life that I was leading than coming out as poly was. Because I have a mom who's pansexual. I had a lot of gay friends. Like it was less crazy coming out as poly, because I'm the same in the sense of once my husband and I decided we were going to do this, I wanted to come out to my family immediately. Like I want to be public about it. I don't want to lie. And so that's kind of my second part of this answer is like, you I will say, like, the resiliency required to be very public about it is pretty, has been for me, it turned out to need to be profound. Like, I had to be it's quite emotionally draining. And there was so I really respect when people decide to be more private about it. I know it takes time. That said, I know for me, my calling is to try to be very honest and more honest, and try to, like, move the needle on this socially. So, but what it means then is that I face society shame back towards me pretty regularly around it, including, like, issues with a job of mine that I eventually left because of some of this, like really, really serious stuff. Yeah, really serious stuff. So I don't think I totally knew I was biting off all of that. And I don't regret any of that, but I wanted to be honest about that part of it, because I do think it's crazy how far behind representationally poly is than some of the other queer identities. It's not explicitly a queer identity, except for that I think it is, in that it's queering relationships. So I would say, which I love, but I think that that's something I want to be talking about more, because I want people to feel supported if they are having that kind of conflict around it once they come out.
Yes,
It's an orientation. I know there's a debate about that, but I fully feel like I think people are actually born more monogamous or more poly or something in the middle. I truly feel that way.
I agree. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa, please.
Oh, I was just gonna riff off what Lauren said. I was not one of those people that felt guilt or shame, and was very optimistic both when I came out, which I came out before Ellen, and then and to not a good reception, but for some reason I thought, of course, why not, yeah. And then again, at 26 I came out as poly, and again, just like to everyone, and was like, here, let me share this thing, and then was like, oh wait, like nobody's okay with this. The queers weren't okay with it, straight people, my family, like no one was okay with it. And yet I still was very stubbornly attached to the idea that, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to give people time, have some patience, and do a whole bunch of emotional labor, so that one day, hopefully, poly is gonna feel as easy as queer is now. And I think we forget, because we're living in 2020, where we were around queer issues just 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And, poly's got to go through those growing pains. And that means that some of us, like clearly Lauren has agreed, and everyone on this panel has agreed, we're gonna step up and talk about it and be present and make it easier for anyone who wants to practice it going forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, much like queer stuff, I can say that some of the biggest challenges for me in terms of guilt and shame that I'm still really, really in process on, and I want to put that out there too, much like one's sexual and or gender identity, poly identity is a process too, and it's a journey, and it is ever evolving. I don't know any poly person who is a fixed point in it, so you have to know that that's just part of the game, and it's okay as long as there is continual communication about where you're at with the people that you're involved with. But I know for me, in terms of my journey right now, there is definite shame and guilt that I'm working through around parental expectations, around familial expectations, around what I grew up believing a family looks like, and what my family expects my family, my family that I'm growing to look like. And it is continual, because you think about all of the family traditions and the holidays, and if you live somewhere other than your parents, when your parents come out and visit, or you go home and visit them, how much are you willing to sort of go up against their story of who they want you to be, much like queerness in that way. And so that is something that I'm still dealing with. That said, with both my parents, the needle has moved slowly. And so I'm just going to continue on that path. But it's not without a lot of having to talk to myself and tell myself I'm not a bad person and that it's okay not to be in the kind of relationship that they wish that I was in. So.
What about you, Mandahla?
Sorry?
You.
What about you?
What about me? I mean, I was super shy guy about our relationship in the beginning, but I think that was just because I've come a long way since then. I think trying to think about the shame and guilt that I feel in regards to this, and I don't like. I'm happy. I love the family that I have. That I love our Trinity. I don't have the parental heaviness that others might have because I don't have those parental figures. And I think my shame and guilt is more about being in a relationship and accepting and opening up to a white cis straight man. And that was a big thing for me because I've never had great experiences with white straight men. And so that was the journey for me. That was rather, without the guilt and the shame, it was more the guilt and the shame of what I felt and the walls that I had up with Goose and what I had to do to work around that so that we could have the dynamic that we have now. So that was the journey that I needed to go through.
Yeah, and that was a journey for him too, because he had to, not take things personally and also like really humble himself and step back and say, what do you need from me? And how can I make you feel the most comfortable? And I can say it's been a beautiful thing to watch you two and your relationship grow. It's been maybe my favorite thing about our whole relationship. So on that sentimental note,
I am wearing his hood that he bought me at the Renaissance Fair so that he's here.
So a couple of these we even have touched on already, which is excellent. But so one thing that somebody asked is, I'm curious about how many people on the panel entered into relationships knowing they were poly so they could communicate that early on versus realizing it during the relationship. Very common question. Anybody want to tackle? Lisa, yeah. Oh, muted.
Sorry again. Yeah, I said I've done both, and since other people have done the discovery, I'll talk about the entering with intention part, because after my first triad, I realized of the three of us, I was the one that I would define as more poly. One person clearly ended up being more monogamous, and one person I would say is more, what's the term you used, Dalila?
Ambifidelitis.
Ambifidelitis, yes. Could see that person going either way. But for me, when I realized I really enjoyed the dynamic of having more than one partnership, I made a very conscious decision to look for a long-term partner that shared that feeling, because I did feel like I wrestled a lot in my first relationship with the person that turned out to be more monogamous. They didn't know that at the time, we were just discovering it. But it ended up, causing a lot of pain in that relationship. And so I wanted to go in with intention. And I ended up finding somebody who told me, without knowing I was poly, they told me on our third date that they thought they were polyamorous. They hadn't done it before, but they felt pulled to that. And so they were worried I wasn't going to be interested anymore. And I was like, no, I just won the lottery. It felt amazing. And we proceeded to have a relationship that, while we were mostly monogamous for the first couple of years, we opened up extremely slowly, and we're together for over 10 years. We're not together now, but still an amazing human being who I love and is still in my life. But I think having that intention really did help. Obviously, like if you're already in a relationship, you're going to have to navigate that as it will. I forgot what the initial question was, but I will say that I definitely had the intention, and I knew that I couldn't commit long term at that point in my life to somebody who wasn't willing to explore that, because I felt like I had just gotten a taste with like 2 years, and I knew I needed to explore it more and to give it a fair chance, you know, to be in it with somebody who wanted to do that. I'm going to go ahead and say to anyone listening, the piece I didn't get right away is you also have to pick other partners who feel the same way. So it's not just your primary partner, it's also looking into secondary partners who are going to be really genuinely open to that idea. And like, of course, some people will just change over time, but it's something to be aware of, that is a lot to ask of somebody to change what they want. Like if they really, really are attached to monogamy, it's a challenge.
I would say it's almost impossible if you're really attached to monogamy. I just don't, I did not know, I didn't know about myself. I didn't know when I was in I didn't know anything about my queerness. I didn't know what polyamory was. To be honest, most people back then didn't know what polyamory was. There was a lot of very old white people who had clearly discovered it in the 60s, and it was fingers. But the only reason why I found that out is because once we started exploring it and we had this girlfriend, we're like, there has to be other people like us, because we felt very alone. We're 2 Black people who had a girl. Like, it's like, this is it. Everybody's like, you are crazy, you are insane. And even before we got married, our premarital counselor actually asked, are you going to be monogamous? And I was like, what you mean, are we going to be monogamous? I didn't even know that was like there was another option. I was like, are you crazy? And at the time, my now ex-husband was like, I don't know, but neither of us had ever talked about this. It wasn't, he's like, it's not because I want to be with other people. He's like, I just have a gut feeling for some reason that's not going to be our thing, but I don't know why. I was like, you're nuts. And then that conversation happened with this woman and something started to open up. And I was like, what is happening right now? And originally it was, I don't want him involved with what was happening with us at all. Like he was fine with that. And he had other fidelity problems in the past, which is why I didn't trust him around that kind of stuff. But as we built more that.
Oh, Dalila, you broke up just a little.
She's frozen.
Yeah. Oh, you're back. You're back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a little delay on your camera, but it's okay. As long as we can hear you, it's okay.
Okay. So all that was to say, I didn't know. And then we started exploring this and we realized we were all in love with each other. And it's like, okay, we cannot be the only people on the planet who have ever experienced this. So we started looking it up, but everybody kept showing up polygamy. And then eventually, because the internet now either, so I couldn't just find as much information on the internet either. So it took a lot more digging. And then we tried to like connect with groups, but like I said, it was people who were so different from us. It was like all white people in their 60s. And we were like 20 something Black people who were like, this is weird. And these people feel weird. And I don't know what to do. It feels like very unfamiliar. And then eventually I met a group of friends that had a few other poly people in it that were closer to our age, that made us feel safer and more comfortable. But even in that group, there was only like us and like one other couple that was open, but at least people were accepting of all of us. You know what I mean? So yeah, we had no idea. We were figuring out, we were bumbling blind, leading the blind through everything. It's a mess, but we were figuring it out.
Yeah. Lauren, what about you? I know.
Yeah, my husband and I, when we got married, we explicitly had conversations. We were like, monogamy doesn't have to be a part of our marriage, but we were not actively open yet. So we went into the marriage accepting that wouldn't be a term, but that's a huge difference. It's great groundwork, but it's a huge difference from that to actively do it. So when I kind of came out to him first as like, this isn't just a thing I want to do, it's an identity I've realized I have, he was totally open. He was so wonderful and non-judgmental and very open and very loving, and felt so bad that I had been in pain and shame around it for so long. Like, he just was wonderful. And it was such a testament to like why I married this person. It was just like, oh yeah, this is such a wonderful partner, and he's definitely going to try to do it. It's definitely then the person who's now my girlfriend, she watched us. She knew us before we were open through to being open. And she and I were aware we had really strong feelings for each other during that process, which definitely made things complicated because it's hard to go at you kind of need to go, if you're in a relationship, you need to open at the rate that's comfortable for that relationship. Yes. It is challenging if you have another thing where you're like, but I'm trying to get at this thing. I don't want this thing to go away. So we navigated it ultimately, but it was definitely challenging at times. I highly recommend bringing in a couples counselor who is poly positive. We found a wonderful woman who's been in a poly marriage for 25 years. She's incredible. She works remotely on Zoom and stuff. She was great. I really recommend her. There's people around. You kind of have to find them from your other poly friends, but like from those communities. But she was great. So it's just great to not even have that be the question. Like, we're not like debating if it's going to work. We're just getting to the nitty gritty of what terms, what agreements, what do you guys feel good about? Like, so that was wonderful. I will say I did like before quarantine, I was starting to do the lightest amount of like feeling it out with additional like random people, like random dates here or there. And it's such a relief to be able to just from the beginning say, and by the way, I'm poly, I have this and this, and like, here's the thing, and this is what I'm looking for. It's like really nice to be on that side of it. So it's nice if you know, but the truth is like, something I've been thinking as everybody's been talking is like, because poly's not accepted, I feel like you're often gonna counter people who like maybe have thought of it, but haven't tried it. So I think an unfortunately normal part of this at this moment in history is like, people are going to say they want to try it and they're going to try it with you and then kind of realize it's not for them. Like, because I do think monogamy is also an orientation for some people. So that is sort of the name of the game, even though it's kind of draining. I do think it's like part of it.
We call it the poly pancake. You know how like the first pancake's always like not very good because you're just testing it.
Yeah. That was my experience with the first girl who shall remain nameless, but is named to literally everybody on this. You guys all know what I'm talking about. But like the first girl who I dated while I was with my husband, because I went into that relationship with my husband eyes wide open, because I, much like Lisa, had spent 2 years prior to that sort of exploring and going like, this needs to be a part of my life, and I'm now going to be really intentional about this. But it still took like, almost 2 years for he and I to actually open it up. I mean, we were very, very slow and intentional about it. But the first person that I was with, it ended up being so dramatic because as much as she said she was okay with what was happening, her actions were so telling me that she was not okay being in a poly thing and very much would have wanted to be with me exclusively. And it just caused way too many issues. So I agree. I mean, it kind of, hey, it's par for the course. You gotta go through it. But,
I think it's like a mix, because sometimes it's that people are not ready, which I've had that before too. Like once we weren't in that triad anymore, there were people, or on and off in that triad, there was people who said that they were down and were so excited, but then were like, I realized I'm more traditional than I thought I was. And then there was like with our first girlfriend, for her, it was her getting used to because it was so foreign. And she's like, this seems crazy, but I still love you guys. It was very up and down. Whereas now she's like one of my best friends. She's like, I wish I'd had the courage to just really go all in and not be going back and forth, because it was a time where I could have done it. Everybody was free. We could have really gone all in. And she didn't have the capacity at that time to do that because she didn't realize what she fully wanted or what she was capable of and hadn't gotten used to it enough. And then the time passed, you know what I mean? Like the time to make it possibly work passed.
Yeah, that's a very good point too. And I wanted to pitch this to Mandahla and in sort of a slightly different way. You'd mentioned at the beginning that you had been in a previous relationship where that girlfriend pitched the idea of being poly, and you were like, hell no. which I think, you know, some people out there might be able to relate to. So what was the difference for you in terms of that relationship and your feelings then, and to the switch to being with me and being open? And because you have evolved massively on this in the past 2 years since I've known you. So I would love you to speak to that if you can.
Okay, so going into this, I think ultimately the key ingredient is our connection. Because if it wasn't as stardust as it is, I don't know if I would have been as brave and willing to adapt myself to this kind of, to poly. And I say that because I come from a background of very codependent relationships, because I didn't know anything else. And also with my past and mental health, and not knowing how to validate myself or give the love that I needed to myself at the time, I was very trying to seek that from my partners, and it just and hitting up against a brick wall pretty much, because I would require so much from them that it was it was too much. Now with you, I mean, first of all, let me go back to what polyamory is not. It is not easy. It is hard work. It requires a lot of communication, and it requires a lot of patience as well, which I feel very, very lucky to have a multitude of. In the beginning, I was up against a wall with trying to, because I still had the monogamous ideas and what that meant, and it was up against a wall of trying to have that separation between my metamor and myself, and not sure how. I think I felt unsure of what we were meant to be to each other as well, and how that was meant to how that was going to work. And it wasn't until after, I think it wasn't until probably, being honest, September, Octoberish, that I realized that this is not going to work unless I actually really open my heart and let that wall down to my metamor, to Goose, and actually create a relationship with him, so that the tension was taken off Nicole as well, because I saw and could feel that it was just overwhelming to be the V of the hinge of two relationships, of two people, and having to, you know, be the in-between, the middle person of, you know, doing schedules and things like that. And now it's, you know, since God, I love Goose so much. Like, and I was thinking about it this morning, I'm like, I'm going to get really emotional talking about this. So excuse me if I do, but it was opening my heart and actually allowing him in, talking to him about why I had that wall up, and, you know, my sexual abuse, and the fact that my connection with men has not always been positive. But then to have this woman I am so head over heels in love with, to be head over heels in love with this other person, and like compersion, seeing that and seeing the joy that they have together, I realized that the only way this will work is for me and us is if I was able to let Goose in. And now he's like, it's like if Biffle, the aromantic, he's my platonic, he's my brother. And it's that was the really big key ingredient for us. And I think as someone who has come from monogamy and complete codependence to now where I am, I feel really lucky to be in this family. And this, like when Nicole wrote that self-identified poly folks, I was like, that's me. I'm a self-identified poly person. If you asked me 2 years ago, I'd be like, fuck no. But it's cool. It's beautiful. I feel really lucky.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to try to get through as much of the rest of this as possible. Let's see. Oh, this is great. What kind of characteristics are important for a person to have in order to have a healthy polyamorous relationship?
Love,
Integrity.
yeah, love talking about your feelings, I would say. Like love communicating.
Yes. Integrity.
Growth mindset.
Growth.
Yeah.
Capacity for forgiveness.
Oh yeah.
You can't do it correctly. You are going to make mistakes. So
Yeah.
Self-reflection, like being able, like self-reflection and a willingness to become more and more self-aware.
So true. Like I always think about poly, you know, Mandahla, when you were talking about communication, I was like, I actually think poly relationships communicate the amount monogamous relationships should be communicating, but they're not.
Yeah.
Because you're like getting by on the sort of assumptions of what monogamy means. And then I'm like, well, what? So I really agree, because then the other flip side of it, Dalila, what you were saying is like, if you don't want to look at certain parts of yourself, poly gets you to look at them. You're going to end up looking at them, which can be very, like the flashlight goes everywhere a little bit, I think, in poly. So if you have a shadowy thing you don't want to go towards, it can be challenging because you will probably land right next to it in poly. And there's
I think in every relationship, we get reflected back things and we get triggers pushed. Like that's a part of, I think it's part of the purpose of relationships, is to shine lights and for us to connect and hopefully move through and grow through those things versus just being triggered and reacting to those things. But if you're doing poly, you're doing that with more than one person and you're doing it at a different level. Like when people used to ask me like about poly, and this is way before it was in any of the zeitgeist at all, really. And I was like, it's communication Olympics. Like people used to come to me a lot asking questions like, well, should we open up? People, where we feel like there's something, going on, and we think opening up may help. But it was always people who were having problems. I said, listen, Linda, listen. You should not be going into poly because something's missing in your relationship or because you're trying to fix something in your relationship. That you need to have a stable base of communication. You just have to have a stable base. Like trying to go into it to fix an unstable base is just going to topple the fucking base to the ground.
I would agree.
Oh my God, yes. The foundation is everything. And I mean, that's why, like, in some cases we've talked here about like slowly opening up to the extent that the relationship and both people require, which is a different timeline for everyone. And what that really is about foundation and making sure that foundation is like rock solid. And I will say another thing. Yeah, the radical honesty. I think radical is a really important term that Mandahla brought up in the beginning. You have to have a willingness before even being that honest with another person to be that honest with yourself, because you cannot be fully honest with another person unless you are being fully honest with yourself. And it requires an enormous amount of self-reflection. And humbling and coming up against some demons and some stuff in your past that might not feel great and comfortable, but is super important. And to the point about monogamy and like wanting all monogamous relationships should have the same amount of communication that poly requires. One of the books that I read, More Than Two, which I recommend to people. Oh, look, she's got it right there. I will say one of the beautiful things in the beginning that they spend an enormous amount of time on is consent. We talk a lot, especially now, about consent and how important consent is in sexual encounters and romantic relationships and everything. But consent, if you are not being fully honest with your partner in whatever way, they cannot consent to what's happening in the relationship. They are not consenting to be in that relationship if you are withholding information from them. So in a way, you're taking away their ability to consent. And when you start thinking about it like that, it really does take on a different weight, I think, especially since we know so much more about consent now than we did previously. So I would say you have to just be willing to go there and willing to trust that you might actually have a much more positive response to your honesty than you think. I have been overwhelmingly surprised and grateful for the response to my honesty that I have gotten from my partners. Really, it's been a joy and a weight lifted when they don't say you're a horrible person for thinking that. They go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about that. People have more capacity for these things than we give them credit for. So, and yeah, we have 5 minutes left. So any closing thoughts, any resources you guys want to throw out to people?
I want to really quickly say, because most of this discussion has revolved around hierarchical polyamory and also partnered as opposed to solo polyamory. So I'm more than willing to continue talking about this more in the after. But it just occurred to me, I'm like, oh, like even the slow opening up, there's another entire school of thought around being like unapologetic, where you're just like, I'm poly and it's right out the gate and that's it. And you're gonna like give people absolutely like, take it, dive in. If you can swim, great. So there's different ways of practicing it, and we all in this group, I think, lean a certain way, but I just want to say there are other ways and there are other resources, and another that looks less
closed.
Yeah, I mean,
like I tend towards, like, I would say, like, I'm now, as I've gotten older, I'm a woman leaning bisexual. I would say I'm a closed partnership leaning ambifidelitous person. So like, even when I was in my poly triads, it was like, yes, and I want to get married to my wife and my husband and have babies. Like that was like I'm that type of person. But I also know there's a lot of my friends that what they actually really need is multiple connections and continued renewing and new experiences with different types of people, and that it's incredibly important for them and vital to their self-expression, and that is an okay way to be too. It's just that same thing about being able to be self-reflective and recognize that that's what you need, so that when you're talking to people, you're actually asking for what you actually want.
Yes.
One thing I'll really quickly say, coming from codependency, monogamy, is that realizing in this relationship that you cannot get all of your needs met by one person, and it's actually kind of ludicrous to ask that of your partner in the first place. So understanding that one person can't do all that for you, and maybe that's where you get different things from other people. Like I can go to Goose if I want to hang out with him, if I feel like I need, just know that your metamor is also there and on your side and on your team as well. I think is super important. They're not competition.
Okay, we have 2 minutes. Any?
Oh, I also liked the book Opening Up. That was
Yes.
the book I recommended, but that's a really common one. It's got really practical tools, but it's definitely also partner monogamy centric, just to name it.
I'm also going to throw out Love is Not Colorblind, which is the only poly book that is specifically addressing the intersectional space of being BIPOC and polyamorous. So Love is Not Colorblind is a really good read.
Cool.
There is also The Ethical Slut. I would show you that, but my housemates borrowed it.
Yeah. Yes, spreading the love. It's wonderful. Okay, great. Everybody, as we had said, we will figure out a time. I got to see when I have meet and greets to make sure I can when we can coordinate this. But at some point today, some of us will be popping on my Instagram live. I'll just add whomever in here can join, and we will answer more of these questions that we didn't get to. But they have been amazing. You all are incredible. Thank you so much for joining and for being open to learning about this, and spread spread the information. We need positive representation, you know, please, please, please. So thank you, everybody, and have a beautiful rest of CloudCon.
Yes.
Yay.
I know we're like still live.